Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We start day 2, the SICCI Extramural Series Edition 3 with Mitra as the knowledge partner. And we thank the sponsor OPG Power, IG3 and Olympia Group. Today the guest is Mr. Kamal Bali, the President and Managing Director of Volvo Group of Companies. And he is going to talk on the auto industry shifting gear. I request Mr. Ganapati, President SICCI, and the Chairman of EICHER Group to kindly deliver the formal welcome address, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Raghavan. As always, you begin the proceedings. And at the outset, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to all of you for our third lecture series. And at the outset, some housekeeping announcements. At first, apologies for the delayed start yesterday, but I think the cerebral nature of the talk compensated for the wait. And in fact, I've been getting a lot of feedback on the program and requests for the recorded version. Aishwarya is working on it and I'll share it with all of you. The second is there is a session change. Saturday's session with Jan, former minister, is moved to 1 July at 7:30. Please note, Jayan Sinha will be at 1 July at 7:30. And so we have a full weekend to rest and be part of the lockdown in Chennai. Now, coming to today's session, I have the greatest privilege and honor to invite one of the industry stalwarts in the automobile sector, my good friend, Kamal Bali. Kamal is young, he's bright, and he's tomorrow. And most importantly, Kamal and I share a common passion, love for greens. That is the passion for being in the golf course all the time. In fact, this morning I may add that Mr. Sudhir was very tensed because he couldn't reach him to structure it out because Mr. Bali was doing what he's best at apart from running the company, playing golf. Welcome, Kamal, for this webinar series. SICCI and you have a great and warm relationship. You've been part of us. So once again, let me add to the welcome of Dr. Raghavan to you and the collective wishes of everybody participating today. Today, Kamal will touch upon some salient features of the changing scenario in the mobility sector. Actually, if you ask anybody in the industry, the most likely answer you will get is, I'm more sure about 2050, 2050 than I am about 2030. Because it's much easier to forecast what will happen in 2050 than 2030, which is only a few vehicle development cycles away. You'll have a few models and then you are hitting 2030. But by 2050, the way in which people move around is unlikely to see any drastic change in the sense that wheeled vehicles will still roam around in the city streets and existing public transit networks will remain highly utilized. However, the way in which these services are paid for and the way in which these vehicles are propelled and driven is sure to change. Transition most likely is more about being green than anything else, but safe to say perhaps that there'll be greater emphasis on autonomous driving. I've always said this to people, a story that I heard in when I was going around the Tesla factory in California on a guided tour. He said, a few years down the line, you will sit in your car and everything will have an IP address, including you. Even the milk in your fridge could have an IP address. And when you get into an autonomous car and say, go home, the car could well talk back to you and say, you have to go to the supermarket to pick up some cornflakes. So that is a kind of automation you may change, but you will still be on the road. Maybe I'm wrong, but the man who can possibly talk about it best today is Mr. Kamal Bali, and introducing him and setting the context for the evening is Mitra's chief, Sanjay Bandari, and my good friend. And also, before I hand it over to Sanjay, I would like to thank our main sponsors for this program, Olympia Group, the IG3 Group, and of course, the OPG Group, leaders in leading private producers in the state of Tamil Nadu. And our collective thanks to them. And even as I invite Sanjay to introduce and set the context today. Kamal, once again, deep felt gratitude for taking time off during these challenging times to share your thoughts in what is truly a very, very difficult and unknown territory we are all in. Thank you so much, Kamal. And over to you, Sanjay.
Thank you. Thank you, Ganapati.
Thanks, President Ganpa, for this opportunity to introduce such an interesting personality as Mr. Kamal Bali. Good evening, friends. Good evening, Sudhir. Good evening, Dr. Raghavan, and all my other friends. And good evening, Mr. Bali. Welcome to this webinar. We are very eager to listen to you. But before that, I would like to introduce Mr. Bali to this small gathering of ours. Friends, this evening is with a person who is a lot more different than all of us. While all of us in this lockdown are locked in our homes, here is a person who gets up amidst the greens, a huge expanse of greens before him, clean air and a lot of oxygen. Yes, sir, before us is a very, very avid golfer who lives in a golf village away from the maddening crowd, far away from COVID as it is spreading its tentacles. We envy you, Mr. Kamal. I think you have, it is equally an honor to know that he was recently knighted and awarded one of the Sweden's highest honors in the Royal Order of the Polar Star Commander by Their Majesties the King and Queen of Sweden for his untiring support to the Swedish commerce and industry in India. He is also the recipient of the 2019 Machinist Lifetime Achievement Award by the Times of India Group. For the last 2 decades, Mr. Kamal has been at the helm of affairs of top global and Indian brands. Having begun his career with EICHER, then he was with ESCORTS, and then went on to join the Italian major. So this is a tongue twister, so I will try to pronounce, but I don't know whether I'm right or wrong. DEUTZ-FAHR Group, and then also with Singapore Technologies Kinetics. Mr. Bali then took over as a CEO and MD of Volvo Group and has been at the helm of the affairs from 2014. Mr. Kamal has also got a lot of hats to wear. He is the board member of Volvo Financial Services, chairman of the Swedish Chamber of Commerce, independent director on the board of Antrix Corporation Limited, Department of Space, member of Board of Governors, IIT Gandhinagar, board member, Xavier Institute of Management, National Council member of CII, the past chairman of CII Karnataka. He himself is an IIT alumnus and is married to Gina, and a son who is a commercial pilot, and has a daughter who is an educator in international school. One can go on to speak about the different facets of this interesting personality before us. Sir, you are at the helm of the automotive company. All of us are under stress. The fear of COVID and its fallout, the pressures of an economy which is facing severe challenge, the border skirmishes, the blame game that has been happening, the wave of protectionism, Americans first in the US and Atmanirbhar in India. The road ahead is a tough terrain. Very recently, the Director General of Automotive Component Manufacturers Association of India, Mr. Vinny Mehta, has stated that the industry has started planning steps towards deep localization of business to reduce imports. And now comes the stalling of the projects like Great Wall of China in Maharashtra. Sir, in this backdrop, we seek your wisdom, which will take us beyond the 18th hole. You're a keen golfer, and you would have read this book by Deepak Chopra in his book, Golf for Enlightenment. In his book, he has dealt with 7 life lessons. And in one of the lessons, he says, the ball knows everything. And he ends up saying in another lesson, let the game play you. So, sir, friends, I present to you the multifaceted personality, Mr. Kamal Bali, as he navigates us this evening as a very interesting sector, the automobile sector. Sir, the course is open.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bhandari. I would first like to thank President Ganpati for inviting me to this extramural webinar series. Also, my greetings to Mr. Bhandari, Mr. Sudhir, and Dr. Raghavan. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in very strange circumstances where lives and livelihoods have been seriously threatened by an unprecedented pandemic. It is indeed quite stressful times. Economy has been, as you can see, dramatically inflicted due to the COVID pandemic. Now, if you look at the latest IMF projections, which came as of yesterday, the global economy in 2020 is likely to contract by about 5 percentage points, of which advanced economies would probably go down by 8 percentage points, and emerging and developing economies contracting by about 3 percentage points. And if you look at the economies which are going to contract in a big way this year would be United States by 8%, Germany another 8%, United Kingdom 10%, France and Italy at about 12 percentage points, and India at about 4.5 percentage points as well. And earlier the estimates were pretty different. But quite paradoxically, you can see here that the place from the country from where the pandemic started is the only country which will grow in 2020 at 1 percentage points. So that's a pretty much, I would say, a big paradox which we have to understand over a period of time. But the potential silver lining is that there is likely to be a significant rebound in 2021 with the global economy coming back at about 5.4 percentage points. So even though from a smaller base, but you can see a good rebound in case of most economies in the year 2021. So that's the only silver lining which I see in this. Can you move on quickly, Aishwarya? Yeah. So the impact on auto sectors across value chains is no surprise. Whether you look at the auto component manufacturers, Ganpati just talked about it, original equipment manufacturers, sales and aftermarket dealers, and on the demand side, I think they all have been put to different sorts of distress, whether it is financial, whether it is labor, whether it is losing export orders, especially to countries like Japan, because Japan was never in lockdown for a long period of time, and their production went on, and a lot of suppliers from India could not supply to, and therefore some of the Japanese plants had to close down because of supply chains in India could not meet the demand there. And of course the inventories. But if you look at, next slide. If you look at this sector, I'm just giving you an example of series. This sector has always bounced back stronger. You look at the 2008 financial meltdown, quickly this automotive industry from a level of 1,83,000 vehicles bounced back to 349,000 vehicles in a span of 3 years. Then again, we had a period of policy paralysis during 2013. Again, the industry bounced back and reached a level. So between 2015 to 2018, the industry grew tremendously, almost 80 percentage points. And now again came COVID. So I think industry is used to these cycles. So it's not new for the industry as such. But the nature of this pandemic has actually completely shattered the whole mindset of the industry. Can we move on? Yeah. So I will take very quick to give you a quick sense of what's happened. So in hindsight, 2020 started with a sense of optimism because we were growing from 2014 to 2018. We grew almost 70-80 percentage points, relentless growth. And we set a new high for the industry in 2018. And then came a period of dieting. We said, okay, fine. We have grown by 70-80% to 2019. We will accept. Passenger vehicles went down by 15%, and commercial vehicles went down by 28%. So we were very clear that, okay, we have to cut the flap. So even before COVID happened, the industry was getting ready for tougher times. But we were also optimistic that we have new models to showcase. We have a transition from Euro 4 to Euro 6, which is a very major transition. And COVID, we thought, would be a passing phase. I mean, another thing will happen and go away. So that's what the mindset of the industry was. Yeah. Can you go on? Yeah. So then, but then COVID happened. Then we really went into a mode of survival during lockdown. Health and safety became the real issues for the industry. Liquidity pressures, responsibility towards employees, a number of plans which were happening on new product development were put on the back burner. We were looking at plan A, B, C, D, and probably plan E. So all that was happening all across. And then, of course, this lockdown started opening. I mean, unlock started happening, restart with new protocols started. And of course, the CapEx projects were being pushed back. Idea was to somehow get into the revenue and demand and supply situation. But I think more clearly, more importantly, what's happening is that something which we have not realized so far, that this industry is going through a very, very major structural overhaul. And that's what I'm going to focus today with you, ladies and gentlemen, on what is it that this industry is going to go through. What are those paradigms which will happen? Because it's all right to discuss numbers as somebody mentioned that we can say 1 quarter, 2 quarters, or maybe 1 year. But I think it's not the numbers game anymore. I think it's the understanding of the undercurrents, the underbelly, the thing which is holding this industry together and how that is going to change. Can you move to the next slide? Yeah. So I think, of course, from the past, we've had learnings, how to go through this cycle, cut costs to invest for future. Cash is king, preserve it. Relationships are key to during these times. They build resilience, support partners. We are all together in it. And the more important, the takeaway here is manage the present without mortgaging the future. I think that's something very critical for all of us in this industry. But and if you look at what the government has done, yeah, next slide. Yeah, what the government has done, I think, to deal with the pandemic, government has articulated a strategy with a renewed socio-economic resurgence. They've talked of self-reliant in India, Atmanirbhar India, with focus on the 5 pillars of economy, infrastructure, technology-driven systems, using the power of demography and the large demand, potential demand which this country has, and of course getting into a number of reforms and of course the fiscal. We have not seen many efforts or much support on the fiscal side. It's more on monetary and the liquidity side which has happened so far. So I think the demand side still is a challenge. So if I move to the next slide, yeah. So I would say that despite the setbacks, I think one thing we have to understand, we are a land of a billion opportunities. That has not changed. Pandemic has not changed the fact that we have factories in place, we have the whole ecosystem available, and automotive industry is pretty matured in India. I mean, I think that is something which we have to take solace from, that things have not been destructed forever. So I think once this pandemic passes, I think we are in for a lot of opportunities, which I mean, and some of these opportunities are listed here. And this is, we're talking of complete lot of stuff happening on the infrastructure side. Economic corridors are happening, new high-speed rails are happening, 100 new airports to be built, inland waterways. So a lot of economic activity is there in store for us. And if you look at the national infrastructure investment pipeline of 104 lakh crores, which is $1.4 trillion to be spent over the next 4 years, that itself is a big hope. And that's how, if you look at this economy going to $5 trillion from the current level of 2.7 by 2025, we used to talk, I feel with pandemic, we will have to push it by about 2 years. And this is where some of the sectors have been identified, that these are the sectors which will take economy totaling to about $5 trillion by 2027, in which automotive industry will play a very major role, with auto components and automobile industry accounting for almost $500 billion from the current level of 1/4 of this level, which is about $125 billion. We can move to the next slide. Yeah. So another very interesting thing I want you to just spend 1 minute on this slide is that something very, very, again, interesting to note, that just 2 countries account for 40% of the global GDP. And when it comes to manufacturing, these 2 countries account for almost half of the global manufacturing. And so this is absolutely unsustainable. This cannot go on and on and on. So if you look at this, and if you look at the manufacturing part, China accounts for 30% of global manufacturing output. Now, this is something very, very, unique, that 30% of entire global manufacturing is controlled by one country. And India is just about 3.1%, whereas China is 10 times our size when it comes to manufacturing. To my mind, this is a matter to really, I would say this is a great opportunity, and I think we should really focus on this sort of an opportunity which is in store for India. Can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So in geopolitical terms, while there is a lot of stress and not very good feeling because of this pandemic, but I can say there is one silver lining, that is, there can be no better time for India to grab the global trade opportunities like never before. Here there are 3 periods mentioned: BC, DC, and AC. BC is before Corona, DC is during Corona, and AC is after Corona. So if you look at what's happened between before 2019, China has been leading this manufacturing as a manufacturing hub for the world for the last 2 decades. And of course, in early 2019, the Cold War has started between US and China. I would say not a Cold War, a completely clear trade war has happened. And then 50 companies have shifted base from China to other countries. And in late 2019, we found the first case of coronavirus in Wuhan city in China. And in 2020, we got to know that this outbreak is also happening in several other parts. And then US and South Korean companies decide to shift base out of China. And April 2020, Japan announces $2.2 billion for its companies to move out of China. So I think the next 2 to 3 years is very, very crucial as country after country is wanting to shift their supply chains into more reliable and more dependable countries. And I think India has a great opportunity, and that's something very, very important. And this opportunity, I personally believe, and this is something very, very important, this slide I wanted to share. How do we get onto this? How do we get this opportunity? This is not going to happen just because people don't have full faith in China. Doesn't mean they will come to India. India has to grow up and earn that level of respect and credibility to be. For that, I personally believe we need to work on three levels. And I think this is where, Ganpati, I would request that if we can all work together, many associations together, to create a domestic ecosystem. Then that's the first piece. The second pillar is firm level competitiveness. I will not go into details because of paucity of time. And the third is how do we get into the global ecosystem? How do we temper the global ecosystem to our advantage? The first piece is obviously Make in India dashboard, ease of doing business, incentivizing R&D, reducing the cost of capital, power, logistics. Logistics is a very, very big cost. How do we tackle? So this is where the central government and state governments have to play a role together with industry bodies. The second piece is firm level competitiveness, which is completely linked to a company. And I think there is digitalization is going to be very critical. Brand appeal, mature cost maturity models, and all that stuff will have to be done. And the third piece is the global ecosystem, where we have to build not only for India, we have to build for the world. And how do we look at foreign trade agreements? How do we address climate change? What is India's position? How do we build brand India? I think that's something very, very crucial. So I think so I think this is one piece which we need to work on. The automotive sector, therefore, as I said in one of my previous slides, that it has a chance to grow from $125 billion today to almost about $500 billion. And auto components industry has a phenomenal opportunity going forward. If you look at the numbers, of course, I think an Indian automotive industry, I mean, if you look at our two-wheelers, I mean, we have displaced even China, and we are the #1 in the world today. So I think there are many examples of if people, right-minded people come together, if right initiatives are taken, if government comes also on board on the right initiatives, just like everything happened to the IT industry in Bangalore. Government was hands off. They let the industry do things. So I think a lot of things happened. Likewise, the auto industry can also really turn around in a big way if we can press some right levers to understand. So I come to now the most important part of my presentation, and I will try to finish in the next 5 to 6 minutes. I will just touch upon what are going to be the tectonic shifts and the new paradigms in the automotive industry. All the story which I have told you is all fine. These are all understood. These are the challenges, opportunities of geopolitical otherwise. But I think these are the 7 structural things which are happening. #1 is rapid urbanization. Which is going to change, which means that you will need more transport. You will need more mobility. That's the #1 thing. Second is digitalization and disruptive technology. These are coming in, and this is going to be another major driver of structural changes. #3, shifting consumer preferences and behaviors. I will touch upon each one of them for a minute each. And then #4 is changing regulatory and policy imperatives. #5 is flexible manufacturing and industry 4.0. #6 is sustainability and climate change challenges. And this is no more going to be a lip service. This is becoming a serious affair. So sustain. And #7 is a number of other macro factors, including how do we deal with the shortage of drivers, how do we skill them, how do we train them, how do we get a new setup. If you move to the next slide, I will just go one by one on these. I think this is urbanization is going to be one of the biggest drivers of demand for mobility. But of course, this also poses challenges related to pollution, congestion, and inefficient fuel use. Therefore, we will have to really move to better. We'll have to take all these challenges and resolve these challenges and give fuel efficient vehicles, provide non-fossil fuels, and many companies like Volvo, they have taken a commitment and made a commitment to the world that by certain period of time we will have all vehicles which will be non-fossil fuel based vehicles. Of course, not only electric vehicles, there are many other technologies which are coming in. So I think that's something which is going to be the key. The next slide, yeah, is digitalization, and I think this is a very important piece. And this is we call as CASE: connected, autonomous. Ganpati talked about it, shared, and electric. And this is all happening because of digitalization. Digitalization is leading to all of this because digitalization is leading to new business models. Digitalization is leading to a better utilization of sweating the asset better. So somebody buys an asset worth 10 or 20 lakhs, and right now only 1% or 2% of the people in a family are using, and tomorrow you find 20 people are using that asset. So I think that kind of thing is going to happen. Alternative to ownership, vehicle health diagnostics. So number of stuff is going to happen on account of this. So I think that's something which is going to be one of the major drivers. The number 3, consumer behavior, and especially after COVID, new protocols, you will find private transport, which was actually which was being challenged in a big way. The car industry, I think that will get a lot of positive signals and positive demand side. Private transport vehicles, which is two-wheelers and cars and pre-used vehicles, will get a boost. So that's one shift we are noticing. Public transport gets a new chance to become attractive with the new protocols, and if we can develop those new protocols along with the government, public transport can also become very comfortable and also something which we have been seeking for a very, very long time. Specialized trucks in view of e-commerce. Instead of using 20 trucks on the road, we can manage with only 3 trucks. So those systems are available today for long haul cargoes. Logistics ecosystem, very, very crucial. Our logistics cost in India is 14% of our GDP, whereas the global average is 8% of the GDP. So almost 5 to 6% of our GDP goes as waste into the system, which is about close to 200 billion, almost about 150 billion dollars, and that could take care of the healthcare for the entire country. That is the level of thing. Then there are PPP models which are coming into play, where government and private sector are planning to partner to create public mobility services on a PPP basis. Can we move to the next one? Yeah. The regulatory and policy imperatives. I think this is something very, very big change which is going to happen. Implementation of corporate average fuel efficiency. CAFE is a new norm which is coming in, which means that each company will have to declare as to whatever vehicles they have produced in a year, all types of vehicles, they have to submit a calculation as to how much carbon footprint we are creating. We will have to be within a particular level. And then, of course, so this is one. Another one is Make in India and localization for resilient supply chain. So I think that's going to be another big challenge for everyone. And formulation of end-of-life scrappage policy, change in the tax structure. Here we are requesting today, even the trucks are charged at GST at the luxury level of 28%. Buses are charged at 28%. So the request to the government is that we must bring it down at least to 18%. And vehicle scrappage policy is under discussion with the government, which can make a tectonic shift to the industry if vehicles beyond 15 years have to be scrapped. Imagine the kind of demand which we will create. Emission norms, constantly talking about as CAFE, and adoption of new safety standards which were unheard of. So, ladies and gentlemen, whatever you're seeing on the screen is no more a proposal. This is all work in progress, and very soon, just like you saw BS6 coming in, all this is work in progress and in consultation with the companies, and it's going to happen very, very fast. Yeah, the next slide. And of course, then again, another thing, how we manufacture the products. Right now, I talked about the product side, the consumer behavior side, the technology side. Now, this is another piece which is coming in a big way. Industry 4.0, which you all know, I will not talk about, but this is also becoming very crucial. If India has to become the manufacturing powerhouse for the world, it cannot ignore Industry 4.0. We have to embrace some of these practices. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. Yeah. So, and sustainability, this is a big topic. This is something which has always received lip service until now. But I think when we talk of sustainability, we mean that whatever we do has to be on the 4 dimensions of society, environment, economics, and ethics. So I think this is something very, very, when we talk of holistic sustainability, that whatever we do or whatever we are attempting to achieve has to be socially inclusive, environmentally friendly, economically efficient, and ethically prudent. So I think under these four basic themes, This holistic sustainability is going to be the key if you want to export your goods. And not only exports, India is also bringing in various measures on whether it is robotics, whether it is natural ecosystem, whether it is mobility as an experience. So across all these areas, this is going to become a very important parameter. Last but not the least is number of other macro factors which I have not covered elsewhere. One is talent management, which is very crucial, that the HR policies of the companies will have to change from rules to principles to values. So I think I maybe at another point in time, we can talk about these things. We will have to look at cost maturity models in a very different way. We have to look at demand supply alignments. I mean, these are topics which we can probably at some point in time have a session with SICCI members. It's very interesting. Dynamics around drivers, operators, and workforce. I think these are some of the 6 or 7 big things which are going to happen. That's going to change the future of this industry. But finally, my last slide, I'm sorry I've taken a little longer. I would like to say that the road to success in a new abnormal is A, reimagine and reset our assumptions. We will have to really look at every sector of economy with a different lens. We have to reimagine and reset our assumptions. We have to organize for future. Don't organize for today. Future, when I say future in terms of technology, future in terms of changing business models, future in terms of collaborations and platforms. We are not going to work in future. There will be very blurred lines between the organization and your suppliers and your partners. What is where the organization ends and where the partners start. Very blurred lines. Nothing will happen without partnership. So the arrogance of large companies will be demolished. So you will have to work together. Advance with agility, very critical. And digitalize your business. I think these are the four things when I say road to success. I think to my mind, this is something which is going to be the key, and auto sector is no different. It will have to follow this. So I stop here and I will open myself to any questions or reflections if any one of you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bali, for that very comprehensive look at the way forward. In fact, when I titled this session as Shifting Gears, I was wondering that once the lockdown has been relaxed, would the auto sector be able to immediately move into second gear? And whether, as Dr. Kamal Srikumar in his session yesterday was referring to, that there could be a second wave. Does the second wave carry the risk of the auto sector perhaps moving into reverse gear?
Yes, Sudhir, this is one of the challenges which we have still not been able to find solutions to. I mean, we are talking of business continuity plans. We are looking at supply chains which can be localized. But if this second wave of the pandemic happens in the next 3 to 6 months before a vaccine comes in, I think we will again face a similar problem. Maybe we will be able to tackle it slightly better, but I think this will again pull us back. So this is one fear and one challenge, and that's a very valid question, Sudhir, you have. While we will be better prepared, but I think we will not be able to completely mitigate the second wave altogether. I think that's the right, unless we have a vaccine. And Absolutely. If we have the vaccine, then I think things will be a lot different. So there's a big question mark.
Okay, two phrases that you used in your presentation. One, of course, referring to relationships, about how relationships are going to be extremely important. And as you ended, you said the arrogance of large companies need to be a thing of the past. I just want to understand from you briefly, in the last one and a half months since the lockdown has been kind of relaxed, anecdotes that you can recall, something which has been a very heartening kind of a reaction after the lockdown was relaxed, and something which was a very negative kind of reaction, which kind of gives us an idea about the stress the auto sector is going through right now.
So I think that's a very good question and a very good reflection as well. I think, Sudhir, I think one of the key things which has happened is that automotive industry, and especially large players, have opened their innovation systems to smaller organizations, to startups, There are open challenges. Everybody has created, almost all companies have created innovation councils where we are taking inputs and feedback from smaller companies which are doing a lot of good work, because the pace at which they do work is much, much faster than the pace at which larger companies have to go through. So I think one good news is that this pandemic has taught us that how the arrogance, the earlier arrogance of large companies has been demolished, and we have started to learn to work with others. So I think that's the first piece. The other piece is that a lot of us have learned to work from wherever we are. I think that's the second piece, that you don't have to, everybody doesn't have to come to office all the time to be able to deliver. But obviously in manufacturing, until unless we move completely to industry 4.0, which will mitigate a lot of physical presence of people.
Yes.
Okay, so we will have to manage that. So I think there are a number of good stories which have happened. I think another good story is that people have become very compassionate. People, this pandemic has actually softened people. I think people understand this is a chance for renewal. This is a chance for rethought, and probably this is a chance for resurrection. So, yes. And maybe introspect, take a step back and introspect. And I think a number of places at senior levels, at least, this is happening, which to my mind is a very, very, this pandemic has left a pause button for all of us to introspect.
Right. In fact, I think as far as the coronavirus is concerned, the coronavirus operates on a level playing field. Everyone is equal.
Absolutely.
It can get anyone. The other interesting thing that you said was that, like the IT sector in Bangalore, you would want the government to have a kind of a hands-off policy. You wouldn't want the government to do neither backseat driving nor have its hands on your steering wheel. How do you think that is likely to play out, given the fact that you mentioned about the GST rates? You are dependent on the government to a large extent as far as the finances go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, see, there are when it comes to the manufacturing sector, it's very important that we have to understand that there are a lot of hidden costs which are there in our system when we compare with a China or with a Korea or with a Japan. So when we talk of GST does not contain many items which almost contribute to 30% of our buying, which we do. For instance, all the petroleum products. So all the taxes paid on petroleum products, taxes paid on employees' travel, many things which are not part of GST, where we do not get the credit. These get cascaded, and the cost of the companies goes the input cost goes much higher. So I think that's one piece which we have to. The other point which you alluded to was that IT sector was left to certain companies, certain stalwarts from 5 or 6 companies, yes, to configure as to what the sector wanted and how the sector can grow. They were given free hand. I think the same thing will be required for some of the sectors, and we can decide which are those sectors. Maybe you can decide textile industry, you can decide automotive industry, you can decide some of the other sectors of economy. But I think for manufacturing to really take off, you need to give them a free hand. And government, of course, has to play the role of building the brand India. The brand India, government has to come in to support industry to build brand India. So when we go abroad and we talk about made in China, I mean, we all know that, okay, it must be a cheap product. And the moment we say made in Germany or made in maybe in Japan, we know it's a high quality product. So there is a brand association with the country. So that's very, very important. The brand association, and I think we have a great opportunity to India can become a value brand. Value for money is coming from India. Good quality at a decent price. And I think this could be the positioning, and that is where the government support. So government has to be hands off and hands on, both in areas, and that's the way we have to work in partnership.
Right. I think value for money is a good tagline in that sense. Lots of questions have come in from people who are listening in, so we'll try to accommodate as many as possible. Mr. Shroff asking, how real is the opportunity for India vis-a-vis China in terms of business shifting to India? You referred to in your presentation about companies, multinational companies moving out of China. How much of an opportunity is there from an India perspective?
I think, technically a huge amount of opportunity, because very clearly, I can't name companies, but I can tell you a lot of companies want to move base from China to any other part of the world. But then there are countries like Vietnam, Mexico, Thailand, which are really are big competitors when it comes to. So it's not going to be easy. Opportunity, it's a reality that a lot of companies will move out of China, but whether India can get those countries in, those companies in, is going to be not that easy, but it is feasible. I think Invest India under Mr. Deepak, under Mr. Bagle is doing a great job. They are making a very good pitch about India. But at the end of the day, we have to also do all the background work to ensure that when these companies come, if they are being promised plug and play facilities, it should be simply plug and play. They should not run from pillar to post to get approvals. So ease of doing business is going to be very, very ease of doing business and cost of doing business. If these two things can be really, in which India is definitely, we have moved several notches up on that front, but we have to still walk a long distance on that.
There's a bit of a conspiracy theory which has been put by Mr. KK. He asked, there's a lot of control of China in Vietnam. So will it be a surrogate manufacturing facility for China, with China actually controlling what's happening in Vietnam?
Well, I think these things will happen. China may control through some other countries as well. Some friendly countries. It could also be, many countries. I don't want to name those countries, but I think China is a very, very strong player when it comes to manufacturing. As we saw the numbers, 30% of global, they will not let it go so easily. So they will be, and that's a very good point you made. There will be surrogate areas through which China would like to retain control, maybe indirectly. So I think it's anybody's guess as to which could be those countries.
Right. There's also a lot of dependence on China as far as the supply chain is concerned. How do you see that playing out, given the border skirmishes, the border clashes? There is also a sense of let's boycott Chinese goods happening in India. We saw what's happened to the Chinese company in Pune. How do you see this dependence, reliance on Chinese on the supply chain playing out in at least in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most challenging, I would say, tasks. There is no doubt about the fact that a lot of supply chain is coming out of China today for almost every sector of economy, including the automotive sector. So the shift will not be very, very sudden. The shift will have to be over a period of next couple of years. It won't happen overnight. China doesn't control 30% of global manufacturing for nothing. Obviously, they have built capacities, they've built capabilities, they have built capacities over a period of time. So it's not going to be easy, but yes, it's not something which is impossible. And there are other countries like Taiwan, there are countries like Korea, there are countries like so many other countries like Japan and India, which can actually replace China in a very, very good way. But there has to be a proper strategy, and there has to be sectoral strategy. I think we had identified 25 sectors of economy where we need to focus. And I think that's something, if all industry bodies, together with some good industry leaders, we work together with the government and put focus on behind those, I think that will be very, very critical. Just to give you an example of ESDM, electronic components, manufacturing, electronic hardware components. I think those are some areas where India is lagging behind in a big way. But of course, things are changing. We need to really work on those.
Ganapati sir has this question relating to the electric vehicles. Now, given our huge employment challenge, and especially in the post-lockdown period, is it correct to attempt to move to electric vehicles and become a global hub at grave risk to our component manufacturers who are really the big employers?
I think this is a question we have also been talking about, and we have been saying that it has to be in phases. We have to have. I mean, if I give you an example of Norway, and so very clearly they are saying coexisting existence of full electric, plug-in hybrid, and IC engine based. So they are saying 40-40-20 over the next decade. So I think it has to be a planned way. We can't have knee-jerk reaction that from tomorrow we will have only electric. I think we will have to plan this out in a way, give time to industry, give time to the component manufacturers, give time to for development of the infrastructure. So I think that's a very important question, and a very important imperative that we need to tie in all the loose ends before we transition to another technology. Otherwise, we will be left high and dry. So I'm sure Mr. Gadkari is aware of that, and I think, and he's a very intelligent minister. He listens to the industry, and I think they will take the right steps. So of course, there is a huge focus on electric vehicles, but I think we will have to temper that in terms of timing so that we can align the whole strategy in a good way.
Okay. In your presentation, you had quoted a figure from the United Nations, which said by 2030, 40% of Indians will be living in India's mega cities. Now, Ravichandra Babu has a question: will shared mobility transportation change the way people actually commute in growing cities and also the mega cities?
Absolutely. In fact, shared mobility is going to be the biggest opportunity for the industry because a number of other revenue streams will come out of shared mobility. So this is one point I wanted to make here is that going forward, the automotive industry its success will not depend on the number of vehicles it sells. Its success will depend on the revenue streams it creates through data, through going digital, and creating those streams of revenues, new streams of revenues which do not exist today. So I think that's very important. So shared mobility is going to be there definitely, and I think India is going to play because digitalization is going to play a very major role on shared mobility.
Right. Just a little question to what we just discussed about the EVs, specifically about Volvo India from Deva Senapati. He's asking how Volvo India is seeing the evolving EV era and transforming itself specifically in the commercial segment.
So, okay. So let me tell you that we have made very many steps in this area, and we have committed that by 2030, every vehicle which we will have a fossil fuel free model. So by 2030, every model or every vehicle which we make will have an alternative which will not use fossil fuels at all. So we are completely transitioning from IC and from the current technologies to electric technologies. So that's one piece. But we are also focusing on hydrogen cell. So I think hydrogen cell reformers, and I think you may have heard that Volvo and Daimler have partnered to build hydrogen fuel cells, which will be used on board for heavy vehicles, for trucks and for buses, because the payload capacity will be, we don't want to use the payload capacity by putting too many batteries. So hydrogen cells would be the right way to do it. So different sorts of vehicles will have different sorts of technology. And our other company, the Volvo cars, they are moving in very fast when it comes to the cars. They are moving into plug-in hybrids. They are moving into full electric also. And even in India, they will start bringing in plug-in hybrids and full electric vehicles in a couple of years from now.
Right. Since you mentioned cars, a question coming from Appa. He's asking, what's your view for the small car segment and the luxury car segment going forward, both in the short term and the medium term?
Yeah, so I would like to avoid answering the question on the cars because we are not responsible for cars. That's a separate. But yes, I would like to avoid that question.
Okay, no issues, as we discussed in the morning. Mr. Mohan Narayanan is asking, how are automobile companies preparing for potential disruption as in the global supply chain due to geopolitical reasons, whatever is happening in different parts of the world, and whether it will cause a short-time roadblock for the revival of the sector?
Yeah, so let me tell you one interesting thing about the automotive industry. The Indian automotive industry is very matured industry. We started moving on the TQM journey in 80s and 90s, and today we are at par with the best in the world. So I think let me assure you that for existing technologies, India is pretty well equipped to manage supply chains within. But obviously, with the new technologies like transiting to Euro 6, BS6, there are certain components which we have to import, which is the after treatment parts which we need for these vehicles. So
Want to drink some water?
No, it's okay, fine. That's fine. Yeah. So we are pretty well equipped, but when it comes to new technologies, whether it is EV, whether it is hydrogen fuel cells, whether it is after treatment components for BS6 vehicles, these are imported. So we will be dependent on the global supply chains. So definitely we would be dependent. So I think this world cannot exist as different borders. We will have to be partnering and collaborating with different players across the world. And my belief is that world will be a much better place when we accept each other across the world, because one country cannot fulfill all the demands of consumers and of society.
Mr. Manohar wants to ask, what's the future for spare parts distributors in the CV segment, say over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that's the key. The shift is not going to be in terms of just spare parts. The shift will move from spare parts to aftermarket possibilities. What more can you do? Not just spare parts. What value-added services can you give to the customer? I think the era is changing to partnering. How can you partner the OEM? How can you become the extended arm of the OEM and supply some value-added services to the customer instead of just simply supplying spare parts? I think that era of transactions is going to be over. The era of collaborations and partnerships is in full swing.
Right. Referred to Mr. Nitin Gadkari as an efficient minister, a good minister. Now, looking at the pace at which the infrastructure sector is developing, especially the construction of roads and bridges, do you think it's happening at the same pace as how the manufacturing sector is growing, the auto sector? And if not, Mr. Ravichandra Babu wants to know, how would it impact the growth of the auto industry?
I think we have to compliment the government. In the last 3 to 4 years, they have done an outstanding job when it comes to roads, especially the road sector. And they have done an outstanding job. Some of our roads now are world class, especially the national highways and expressways. And they're also creating some interesting industrial corridors. And these are going to be spanning the whole of the country. So I feel when it comes to road infrastructure, they have done an outstanding job. I mean, it's a job very well done. But I think there are other parts of the infrastructure story which also we need to fix, So I think the government is working on those. So we are not much worried about infrastructure story lagging behind too much. Of course, financing of infrastructure could be a challenge from time to time, but I think in principle we see this government faring pretty well on creating infrastructure, especially the road infrastructure.
Right. Volvo has its branding as a premium product. It also kind of pays a premium on safety aspect. But in a post-COVID world, or at least during COVID world, have you thought of changing the branding in any sense? Do you think the way people perceive your brand also needs to change, not just for Volvo One, but also for different auto brands?
Yeah. So Volvo, that's a very interesting question, and I think let me answer that. So Volvo is indeed a premium brand, and when we say premium, we mean that we cater to applications and duties which most other brands cannot fulfill when it comes to safety, when it comes to efficiency. So that's a premium brand. But Volvo as a group has number of other brands to tackle different duty cycles. So for instance, let me explain to you. In the US, we have another brand alongside Volvo, which is Mack. Mack trucks are very popular trucks, and they're heavy duty trucks. They support and complement Volvo brand beautifully. In Europe, we have Renault. Renault trucks are part of Volvo. Renault cars are not, but Renault trucks are part of Volvo. So,
right.
So Renault trucks support. That's at a step, a notch down from Volvo. Likewise, in India, we have a very successful brand called EICHER. So EICHER is another mainstream brand which caters to mass applications, whereas Volvo caters to some heavy duty cycles in the mining area now. So similarly, in China, we have another brand called Dongfeng, and in Australia and in Japan, we have another brand called UD. So Volvo is complemented by a local brand as well in many parts of the world.
Okay. This question comes from a tour operator, Afzal from Parveen Travels. He says, I'm one of the bus operators from Chennai having a large fleet of Volvo in our stable. And while this COVID has put manufacturers and also the transporters out of gear, and EV vehicles being another, electric vehicles being another challenging road path, have you any plans for leasing the buses from the factory to the operators in the near future, similar to what happens in the European market?
Yeah, we are looking at all the options, and I would request him to please come and meet us. We would like to discuss all potential opportunities. We are open to all new ideas. We are open to all new business models, and I would request him to please kindly come and meet us at his convenience, please.
Afzal, I will share his details so that you can connect with him. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be in fact grateful if he can set it up for us.
Done.
Okay. Last couple of questions, Mr. Bali. Now, Chennai is going through a lockdown till the end of the month. The indications are that, given the kind of figures today, in fact, Tamil Nadu has clocked the highest corona positive cases, over 3,500. H.D. Kumaraswamy, your former chief minister, is asking for a brief lockdown in Bengaluru. In case you have another spell of lockdown in July or maybe August, how do you see it affecting your sector in particular, but also the entire manufacturing industry?
No, I think it will be, Sudhir, it will be a big setback to the industry. And I think it can pose some long-term challenges to India. We will lose a lot of opportunities, some global opportunities. I know in my own case, in fact, I have to thank Ganpati for helping us. Some of my suppliers from India, we export almost 1,500 crore worth of components out of India to various Volvo factories across the world. We had to shut down a few factories because component manufacturers could not keep their factories open during the COVID days. So we will not be able to manage another lockdown very efficiently. So I think we will have to be very discerning. Only areas which are very large in numbers, they can be declared as containment zones, and we will have to work. You can't paint the whole thing with the same brush. So we will have to be very discerning and very discreet on all these things. And because I think the whole industry would agree that another lockdown they will not be able to manage efficiently. I mean, there is no way we can manage a complete lockdown efficiently.
Right. I hope the people in charge are listening there. Mr. Sanjay Bhandari spoke of you also being on the governing board of IIMB. What do you tell to the young management graduates? What kind of a skill reset do they need in a post-COVID world?
I think attitude and change to be able to, and I think we need to hire and get people and help them to really make their attitudes open to change, attitudes which are, and they can think on the fly, they have to be agile. I think that's all we need these gentlemen. And last but not the least, I think the social skills, ability to deal with partners, ability to deal with collaborators. I think this is something which is, to my mind, if you ask me, one skill after attitude is social skill. How do you deal with partners? How do you deal with collaborators? How do you deal with colleagues is going to be the deciding factor when it comes to your success story.
Right, especially since, as we said, we are on a level playing field. We need to build those relationships. Thank you very much for this very engaging talk and taking all these questions and giving us a perspective on, to how the entire industry and especially your sector is looking at these rather changing times. Thank you very much for your time and patience.
Thank you very much.
May I now request Mr. Somi Hazari to propose the vote of thanks. He's the executive committee member at SICCI.
Before Somi comes along, Kamal, thanks so much for accepting our request to share your thoughts on what truly is a very, very significant sector for India, because it's the manufacturing sector, particularly the automobile sector, that does the heavy lifting for jobs. And linked with that is a huge supply chain. And in fact, the MSMEs thrive because of you guys. And Tamil Nadu is the engine of MSME for India. 18% of the MSMEs come from here. So this is so very, very vital for us to listen to your thought. But just one quick comment from you, Kamal, before Somi comes on board. As we were talking, Sudhir was talking about attracting investment from China into here, and you were cautiously optimistic given the challenge that comes around from Vietnam, amongst others. How important is creating social infrastructure ahead of that, which will enable a better decision making?
Very, very critical. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that's very, very crucial for us.
Isn't that one of our weak links entirely?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm sure most of them will raise their hands. I think the world has changed. The expectation of the youngsters has changed. The expectation of the investors coming abroad and coming from overseas has changed. Are we as a nation gearing up, or do you see any signs of that coming? It requires as Sudhir would probably say, a reset in mindset. You see that happening or not?
I mean, a lot more has to happen. Not at the pace which you and I would want. Definitely not Ganpati. And I think organizations like SICCI, Swedish Chamber, CII, I think we all need to work and bring this point to the fore as much as our other demands on the government. And I think a lot of stuff has to be done by the industry bodies and by the companies, in addition to really pushing the government to support us on this. I mean, I think, and thank you very much for bringing this point. I think I have not talked enough about this, and I think this is very, very crucial, I think, initiative on the part of all of us. I mean, if we owe it to our next generation.
Yeah, in fact, I think media guys like PS should make this the front and center requirement for government to reset their thinking.
Absolutely.
I think we have all written enough mails. We've talked about it till the cheeks have gone blue. But I think action must come from the media to get the government and other bodies to focus
Absolutely.
on. Social infrastructure will play a very key element in decision making going forward.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kamal. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Somi, all yours.
Myself, let me start by appreciating and thanking the excellent talk given to us and explained very well to us through the web by actually Dr. Bali. There are a lot of key takeaways from this engagement, and I thought to name a few. It is really good to see the bright spots pointed out so well by Mr. Kamal Bali. And I think the few points which I'll just list out do actually stay with us. And these at least are very, very good points, which say, do not mortgage the future, which is an excellent term. And I think this really needs to actually resonate. Also, you have very clearly pointed out that there is no dearth of opportunities and economic activities. You have outlined various areas that show this very clearly. And, you know, the shifts in, I would say, consumer behavior and preferences have been very, very well put across by you. The changing regulatory and policy imperatives puts forward to us what we need to do as well, our side. And it is not only industry and government that needs to do this. It is for us, chambers of commerce, and also for us as people, as citizens, to push forward. Your emphasis on value brand India is very strong. And I feel that if we are to improvise on brand India, it would sort out and it would address a lot of the issues that not only you have mentioned, but it is across sectors and not particularly only to your industry. May I thank you once again very much, Mr. Kamal Bali, for your excellent presentation. Not only was it excellent, it was very good to hear. And as I said earlier, the positives that you put across, we have not heard, at least I have not heard, for a very long time. Thank you very much. We look forward to engaging with you.
Thank you
once again.
Thank you.
And tomorrow we have Mr. R. Gandhi, former Deputy Governor of Reserve Bank of India, speaking to us same time, same link. And there is a session change. Jayant will speak on 1 July at 7:30 p.m. and not on Saturday. So we have a full weekend of rest. Please note these two. R. Gandhi tomorrow and Jayant on 1 July. Thank you so much. Stay safe, all of you. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Bali. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.